Welcome to the BitMart BrainTrust. As always, we get around the non-fungible campfire and talk all things crypto and NFTs, primarily NFTs because you're listening to this on the NFT 101 podcast page. But as always, I am joined by two of my favorite humans. You know them, you love them. Well, all right, you may not love them, but you'll at least like them. Nathan Simone and Kelechi Ibe. I love them. I personally love them. But Nathan, we have a guest on the program this week, someone joining us for the first time, and it's coming to us from the Cardano world. Fill us in on who's joining us here on the mothership.
Exactly. Everybody knows that we hate Cardano over here at the BitMart BrainTrust, which is great. We talk about it constantly. People are probably sick of it at this moment, but it's the third lady to brave the BrainTrust. The first one they had was a beauty queen who now does technical analysis and is a trader. The second one was a stand-up comedian who worked for the CIA. People forget that. And the third one, I think, is even better. It's Nighthawke, who is a lady in the Cardano space doing so much stuff that I can barely keep track of it. I actually have to have her link tree here pulled up to keep track of the stuff that she is doing. One of the first female advisors, the first female advisor in the Cardano space, here to chat with us about one of our favorite subjects. Like I said, Cardano. Kelechi, Matt, please, let's welcome Nighthawke here to the BrainTrust. Heyo. How are you?
Thank you so much for I'm really excited to chat to you guys.
Same here. I know that you know Kelechi a little bit because you have helped him out with Ghost Chain NFT Club. And even though that is still in the building process, and they are building, aren't they, Kelechi? They are definitely building. But I really want to chat with you because not only are female voices and female creators in crypto in general a minority, which is why we liked having people like BTC Bella or Jessica Brodkin on the podcast, because you just get a different, interesting perspective. You are in Cardano specifically, and you are doing it big with Cardano. And you're kind of like for lack of a better word, like a leader of Cardano women, to where I knew about you because I saw you on Twitter and Kelechi introduced me and things like that. But then I would go to your link tree and you would host these roundtables with other Cardano women that are other creators in the Cardano NFT space. And I would be like, I've never heard of any of these people. So it's a good thing that I was introduced to them. And we definitely want to chat with you about all things happening in Cardano right now. Cardano NFTs, women in Cardano, just that, to kind of set the stage right there. So maybe a good way to start here, because other people might not know you, especially if they're not big into Cardano, even though they should be. And because you've interviewed people like Patrick Tobler, who we've had on the show, friend of the show. Please come back, Patrick. We're dying here. Maybe you could tell us how you got into Cardano and how you specifically have become an advisor and just kind of the litany of stuff that you do. And that would be an easy place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is in consulting, specifically technology and software as a service. And it was during COVID, actually, that I really started to dig into crypto and specifically NFTs. So I was actually watching one of my favorite crypto YouTubers called Brian Jung. And he all of a sudden was covering NFTs on Ethereum. And I was doing some research and I went to OpenSea and I wanted to buy a decentralized skin for about $13, $15. However, the gas fee was about $185, $200. And I thought, no, there's got to be a more efficient way of purchasing and getting involved in this emerging market called NFTs. And from there, I did some research. I went into Reddit and all of a sudden people were chatting about Cardano NFTs and that there were really no transaction fees, or no gas fees rather. And the transaction fees were so minute that it was a fraction of an ADA. So it was quite affordable. And I saw, this entire marketplace emerging that was just like a startup. There were no best practices. There were no leadership. There were these one-off projects minting, so effectively publishing their NFTs on the blockchain because they could. And the roadmap was very much inspirational. It wasn't necessarily something that we could guarantee as project leads that in fact it could be done. So the first few projects, and I want to say we're starting to mint back in March of 2021, they were simply minting as proof of concept, really. There wasn't too much in the form of utility, right? There wasn't a next step in terms of, okay, what do we do now that we have these pretty profile pictures, or JPEGs as people like to call them? And so really, you know, I spent 2021, I joined the space as far back as I can remember, when I joined Discord, which was so intimidating, by the way, but that's, you know, the primary point of where all these projects live and where the communities live is in Discord. And I was so intimidated. And I look back, and it was actually the 1st of June 2021 that I joined Discord. And that's when I really started to kind of dig into the projects. I moderated a bit for a Twitch streamer. I just volunteered my time to get to know the projects and the leads, and just sort of make relationships with other people that were hosting interviews on YouTube. And one of those really popular YouTubers, specifically for Cardano NFTs, is Cardano Thor. And we actually kind of grew up in the space together. We joined around the same time. I remember joining his stream and learning about NFTs together way back in the day. And yeah, from there, I just kind of learned and had conversations. And I think the most important bit, as far as me kind of familiarizing myself enough to advise, was to build relationships with those projects and volunteer my time. So it might have been for a month, it could have been for a quarter or a year, but I really did volunteer my time and get to know kind of where we were at, and try to get a glimpse on where we were headed. So I was trying to kind of work with the project leads and anticipate what our community would want next. And of course, the community was looking at Ethereum, which at that time was about 4 or 5 years of maturity. And so, you know, we were basically trying to figure out, okay, what should we offer that's different about Cardano? How are we going to differentiate our projects? And really, how are we going to provide value to those people that are all of a sudden minting our projects and putting an ADA into our ecosystem?
Fascinating. So you're telling me that the entire reason you're in the Cardano space is because you started looking at Ethereum, and I tell people this all the time. The gas fees are crazy, people. The merge didn't help that. It just helped energy usage. I'm going to ask you a follow-up question here, but I just wanted to say, you know, I also, when I first got into NFTs, OpenSea was like, I don't know, it's like the Walmart of NFTs, right? You're just like, there's one in every corner. I set up a wallet, and I even timed, because I knew that Ethereum gas fees varied depending on the time of day. I timed to wake up at 2 a.m. to fund this wallet. And it still cost me $160 to initialize the wallet. You know how often I use that wallet? 0. I never used that wallet. Okay. I used it a couple of times. I got familiar with NFTs. I'm interested in this though, real quick. So obviously you wanted to go to Cardano because there aren't any gas fees and there are fractional transaction fees because Cardano has been set up like that. Did you investigate other blockchains? Because it seems like you weren't into crypto or NFTs at all until last year. And now you're like, obviously way deep into it. I feel like I'm talking to an OG, you know, somebody who's been in as long as I have, since like 2017 or something like that. So did you investigate any other blockchains, or did you just land on Cardano because you saw that they'd been building from the ground up in this academic fashion for so long?
That's a good question. And in some, I did not. I got kind of lucky. I landed in Cardano. I saw that there was opportunity to be an early adopter. I saw that there were more doors open to me than not, which is very atypical. You don't get that in Web 2 at all. There are leaps and hurdles. There's seniority to deal with. There's red tape, legalities. And, you know, in Cardano NFTs, there's not, or there wasn't at the time. And as I was volunteering myself, I just kept getting, yes, 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 we'll take you, whatever, what do you think? And, you know, I kind of put my consultancy cap on, and I thought, right, what would I do in a startup environment? First, I'd learn the space, then I'd learn the client, which is the projects. And then from there, I'd craft a consultancy. And that's really what I did. The thing about Cardano is that the ecosystem is very, on the whole, welcoming, or it was at the time. And there was very few sort of red tape. And for the most part, you could get into any door you'd like. Certainly now there are politics involved and there's other sort of structures in place. But at the time, there really was opportunity to kind of make your mark and choose the rules for yourself, because there was really no advisors there. There were no formalized community managers there, or even formalized marketplaces. I remember, and like, no offense whatsoever to Ryan at CNFTIO, he's a doll, but I remember looking at CNFTIO, which was the primary marketplace for Cardano NFTs at the time, and it reminded me of a diary of a WordPress website one might use as a blog, and the UI was just not that great, and everything just looked so initial that I knew this was an opportunity.
Fascinating, because what's funny is people outside of the Cardano ecosystem, so, despite being the third largest chain, I believe, on NFTs and consistently in the top 10 on CoinMarketCap, there's people that are still just not even like aware that it's really a thing. So it's funny that you're saying like, oh, I remember the good old days when you could just walk in and there's no red tape, because to some people, maybe that still is the way if they're coming from Ethereum or they're coming from, I don't know, Tezos or Algorand or something like Solana. That. Oh gosh, we're going to talk about Solana later. But I find this fascinating because you have like a consultancy / management background. So maybe it was much more natural for you to come in and be like, because I don't want to say a criticism. Something that I love about the Web3 and crypto space is you have a lot of creative people sitting right next to very, very technical people, but not enough people in the middle to help manage them both so they can both work together. Yeah, so you definitely probably have that skill set from all the stuff that I've seen, where a lot of people probably not only wanted you, but needed you. And I wondered if you could speak a little bit more on that.
Sure. Yeah. And I think the middle ground really that you're sort of insinuating would be more of a project manager type skill suite, right? Where you kind of know to put the pieces together, you understand the big picture goal, and you assemble team members who have that skill sets to actually move forward and begin executing and evolving our space. We don't have that. We still don't have too many of those. It's true that it does seem like the space as a whole tends to attract two camps, and really no middle ground. So that's really the ground that I represent. So the two camps really are the collectors themselves, right? Those who are casual investors who are curious and they want to effectively build up their bag before Cardano becomes too expensive to invest in. And the second camp are developers, those who actually want to build on Cardano and want to see how much they can make a difference. Okay, that's great. So really where you see me fitting in is in the middle ground of project advisory and management. And there are very few people, I think, within that sort of background where this ecosystem makes sense to them, because it's unproven. You, in a sense, really have to be willing to work in ambiguous scenarios. And you have to sort of make this up as you go and be willing to structure your rules modeled after Web 2, modeled after whatever it is that you learned, in your corporate job or whatever. That's scary for a lot of people. And it certainly was for me. I mean, sometimes I think like, who do I think I am to do this? But at the same time, I can kind of paint it over, but in some, it's because I could, right? It's because I had enough belief in myself and enough doors open that I just sort of took a chance and I started to continue to build. I wish that we had more people that came from a similar background that could sort of specialize in team formation and leadership and public speaking and all these different things. But the reality is that it takes a very specific kind of person who's willing to work with ambiguous scenarios like this, where absolutely nothing is guaranteed. And you really have to treat everything you do in this space as a startup. You're absolutely going to be investing before you see any payback. at which point that payback might be, at maturation, which is 4, 5, 6 years down the line. And so not only is it a matter of skill suite, but it's also a matter of endurance. And when you put that together and you're asking a lot from others who have, a job or children or partners, it's a lot to ask to invest in something like that.
Absolutely. I know exactly what you mean, but from a different perspective here. And Matt or Kelechi, feel free to jump in at any time. What you're saying about, it's funny because you're speaking about Cardano, like there's still so much, like there hasn't been all this development that's done. The Basel fork upgrade went live in early September, which was essentially Cardano's version of the merge. It improved the system even more. Transaction fees went down even more. Nobody seemed to talk about it because, Ethereum's the big boy on the playground that everybody wants to play with or something like that. But I understand completely what you mean in an even broader context where I will still talk to people about Bitcoin as a store of value, as a financial investment, and they don't want to touch it, even though it now has over a decade of, it's growing. People continue to improve it. You have institutional investment in the billions of dollars. So I definitely understand what you mean when you're talking about an even, technically smaller project, a project that is not in the mainstream public eye, does not have the brand recognition like Bitcoin, but which actually is somewhat better and inspired by Bitcoin because that's how Charles Hoskinson wanted it to be. I'm interested, we asked Patrick this as well, but I'm interested in your opinion about what makes Cardano so different? What do you think attracts people to it? And specifically, Cardano seems to attract these very creative, interesting people that they're not like hardcore kind of political people, like a lot of people in the Bitcoin space, but they're also not these like kind of crazy developer, try not to frame people too negatively here. The type of people that are usually attracted to Ethereum that I get
maxis.
the Ethereum maxis. I actually like the type of people that Cardano seems to attract. And I'm interested into what you think makes Cardano so different and why these kind of like beautifully weird people are attracted to Cardano.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Charles Hoskinson has established an ethos of the blockchain, right? Which is helping others. It's about effectively solving real world problems to bank the majority of the world. There's a sense of altruism, I think, in the ethos of Cardano. And it's made very clear throughout leadership. And that, I think, really attracts, like attracts like. And I think that that message does permeate our entire ecosystem, especially when it comes to the developers, especially when it comes to the people that are actually creating use cases out of our blockchain. So when you have that and it's consistently communicated, then you're probably going to get like-minded people. That's my theory, at least.
It makes sense. And too, I'm a recent convert to Cardano. I've known about it since it came around. My brother was actually the first one to tell me about it, but it took Kelechi, when me and Kelechi went to a conference in Austin, just hammering it into my head every day. You know how Kelechi is. He's just a hard ass. No, he got me to look at it a second, maybe third time again. And then he was really talking about it. He was like, Cardano NFTs are really coming up. People are sleeping on them, to which I think they still are technically in the mainstream blockchain space. But that's another thing too, is that not just what's available on JPEG Store, just on all the Cardano NFT marketplaces. I personally like Cardano NFTs better than any other blockchain because it seems to attract this really weird type of altruistic, just nice artist. And I know you talked about there's politics in the community now. That's in everything, but what do you think about it? That because the Cardano ecosystem, NFT ecosystem too, is relatively new. Why do you think that it was the Cardano NFT ecosystem that got this great infusion of art that's now coming from Solana? We can talk about that. Is it just because the transaction fees were finally there, so it's more of a free market, or is it once again what you're speaking to about this ethos of like Charles Hoskinson has deemed a utopia, and so it shall be so?
Yeah. Well, okay. So a lot of these projects, you can think of them as businesses, right? A lot of them have business models. The ones that don't work out tend to not have great ones. However, as a business owner, you're looking at, right, what is the lowest hanging fruit or the barrier to least resistance when you're starting a business, and that includes cost. So when you are launching, there's a huge difference between launching a project on Ethereum, which is going to cost you tens of thousands, versus launching on Cardano, which is probably going to cost you to mint, I don't know, a few hundred. So that's the case. But also, I think we see a lot of artists coming over to Cardano NFTs specifically because they see what I saw, which is there's room to grow, there's room to make your mark, and you're not going to necessarily get easily overlooked on this blockchain. It's really easy to be a big fish in a small pond still on Cardano if you are, in fact, bringing something of value. A perfect example is cornucopias, right? They're an emerging gaming AAA gaming actually project that's emerging on Cardano, and no one else is doing what they're doing. And so it's really easy, I think. And when you chat to these projects, a lot of them they're looking to make a splash, but they're also looking to be an early adopter. So in a sense, they all kind of are, they have that cap of innovation on them already. They want to stand out. And on Ethereum, I think too, and on Solana, there's a mixture of the culture that doesn't necessarily appeal to them and the politics involved, not just the financial aspect of it.
I have a question about that. Sorry, Nathan, but
no worries.
When you talk about the politics of it, it does feel, and this is prevalent in every aspect of modern culture, tribalism within the space. People who are fiercely loyal to one thing and will forsake all others for it. Do you feel that the Cardano space does a good job of trying to limit tribalism? Do you feel that when it's, when in comparison to Ethereum or some of the other blockchains, or even just people going into hyper-specific exchanges, it starts to feel like sports, or starts to feel a lot like politics, where people are picking sides and are being absolutists on specific things instead of having a conversation and talking about what's best for the total ecosystem instead of these different echo chambers?
Yeah, absolutely. In some, there's absolutely tribalism in Cardano NFTs, and that's one of the recent trends that the space was not infected with it early days, meaning last year. This year, it's a completely different story, but it's also part of being an ecosystem that's growing and it's figuring out what it is, right? Because we're in a bear market as well, things have slowed down in terms of the hype. The development itself is not at all, but development is not sexy to the masses. Talking about protocols is not sexy. So what we have is tribalism at the moment. And I think it's going to phase out because people are going to see that the most important thing, and the thing that's really going to pump their bags, if that's what they care about, is continuous building, and then seeing those things launch. And then from there, seeing the valuation of their NFTs by force increase. So at the moment, we absolutely have tribalism. I'll be honest, it's not the greatest experience. You're not touched by it just because you're in leadership or you're part of a project. It's everywhere, specifically within Twitter Spaces. There are groups that simply choose to focus on one or two or three projects over and over again because they're major holders of those projects. And, there's definitely a group that focuses or chooses to support certain projects and then ignore the others. And I think, again, it just kind of comes to the time and maturation that we are in. I think it's going to phase out, but until we actually see the fruits of our labor start to mature and launch and make us all wealthier, I would say, then you're going to see this happen. It's just an unfortunate part of growing, I think.
Oh, yes.
A quick follow-up to that. You had mentioned that like the early days, last year, the space was more like welcoming, in terms of, ideas and people. but it seems to sound like lately it's not been that way. It's not as welcoming as it once was. Do you know why that is, or where that's coming from?
We since the rising of Twitter Spaces, which only happened several months ago, there are definitely more people coming in, more people who want to learn about the space, and their favorite way of learning about Cardano NFTs is through Twitter Spaces, actually. And we have now hosts and personalities and influencers who are establishing themselves as influencers that appeal to a lot of people, and they have the primitive and very powerful situation of being influencers for our incoming investors or those who are thinking about investing. So they can use it for evil, they can use it for good. Some of them, have their place, and it's a struggle for sure. One of the things that I did actually recently was launch NFT Guardian. So it's a brand new Twitter space, and on that page, I say information first. I want it to be all about the information, bringing value from the second minute we're on, talking to our top minds like Patrick at NMaker, Blake at JPEG Store, Blackbird at Dropshop, Cornucopias, Virtua, Carter Station, all of these top-notch projects, and bring value to our space so that we can limit the tribalism involved. And part of that is simply to kind of give you guys insight into what tribalism Twitter spaces look like. It's a lot of pumping up projects that, again, they're invested in, or sort of informal conversations that feel more like hanging out and water cooler chat or schoolyard chat than really learning about the protocols and the new technology and the new utilities that are out.
Yeah, that's unfortunate to hear. Kind of another reason why when I do podcasts, I like to do them over video is because even though I love Twitter Spaces, there is that sort of removed element where it's like you could be chatting with somebody on Reddit, right? Where it's text-based and then it immediately devolves in an argument. It's because there's that removal of the human element. And I feel like even though the voices are present on Twitter Spaces, you're not actually seeing somebody. There's not that like that basic level of human dignity there. So that is unfortunate that it is happening. I haven't really been part of a lot of those Twitter Spaces. To be honest, I don't really have that much time. And I also have to do ones for BitMart. But maybe, I don't know. That's why I kind of like your round tables as well, Nighthawke, is because not only did I not know that a lot of these projects and a lot of women existed, it's more interesting, I think, when you can see the actual person. Like, for example, you had, Kelechi won't know this. I knew about Clay Nation for months. I didn't even know that it was a women-led project. And I didn't know that it was a mom and her daughter. And you had one of the moms on one of your roundtables there. And it's just like connecting a person with the actual project that you've seen on the screen, perhaps hundreds of times, I think is a very good thing, not only for the space, but specifically for these projects. Something that I wanted to kind of touch on here, you talked about that talking about development and talking about protocol is not very sexy. I agree as a marketer. But what's interesting is that's what got me to like Cardano when Kelechi kept harping on it, was the fact that I'm not afraid that the Cardano network is going to go down anytime soon. And to now talk about Solana and Solana NFTs, why I think people are moving from Solana to Cardano. I'm not worried about Cardano being so centralized that they're just going to switch it off one day because they feel like it, which has happened on Solana like 5 times this year. People hate it when I say that. And I really would like to get somebody from Solana on to kind of push back against me. But it's also too, Cardano has been self-funded from the start with IOHK and Emergo and all the sort of corporations that they've set up, and they've moved slow so that now when you're like, how can they do all this stuff? And once again, to Kelechi's credit, he was like, because they took the time to do it and they made sure that it was going to work before they launched it. So now when you're seeing the FTX collapse, right, and people didn't know that Solana was FTX was majorly VC funded by Solana, and they're wondering, why is Solana doing all this stuff? It's because there's contagion risk. They were linked to all this stuff. I like the fact that Cardano has taken this development, its protocol very seriously, and it's kind of its own thing that since it has taken the time to grow, since it's laid that solid foundation, the house is not going to fall down anytime soon. Kelechi, Matt, you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I've got something real quick on that. I think that when we're talking about the Solana and FTX connections and the idea of doing it right and doing it fast, what seems to be in this space outside of the HODL movement, there's a lot of people who are getting into this space now for quick cash, to make a big buck, make a big statement, try to get in and get out. And I think that's one of the things that led to FTX's inevitable downfall once you start seeing a lot of the filings coming out about what happened to FTX. And shout out to Nathan, who's got that news coming to us every day on the Daily Crypto Watch. But Nighthawke, when it comes to tempering expectations, you were talking about developing that maturity, developing that yield. It sounds much more like a traditional investment, a traditional security, and kind of going against a lot of the norms we're seeing in the crypto space ever since 2021, when things started going to quote unquote the moon. There's a lot more on the Cardano side, at least what I'm hearing from you, from Kelechi, from Nathan, from other people we've had on the show. It's about embracing the process and trusting that the work you're putting in is going to pay off in the long haul. Do you see people embracing that more and more, or do you see with a lot of the other blockchains, why are we taking our time? Why are we not capitalizing on X, Y, or Z? Do you feel that those voices get shouted down easier in Cardano, or do you think that it's just there's enough people in the space to understand the totality of the process and you don't deal with it as much?
Yeah. So I guess the easiest way to sort of explain this is that you go into, for example, two different shops, right? And they're completely different. They attract a completely different customer. They're run a completely different way. You go into Walmart, for example, you know that pretty much you're on your own to navigate the labyrinth. And however, if you go into something like Saks Fifth Avenue or Louis Vuitton, you're going to have much more customized and faster service. It's the same thing as when you go into Cardano, you know the ethos, you know how we run things, and you know how slowly development is when you compare it to another blockchain, perhaps. So when you get that, all of a sudden there's a culture that supports that. And then they exude those expectations. They remind new investors of those expectations. And from there, as an investor, you can decide whether that works for you or whether it doesn't. And typically, if it doesn't, is when you lose funds the first time or the second time, and then you're out. I can speak specifically to the Cardano NFT ecosystem in that there's definitely an emphasis from our investors, from collectors, and I use those terms interchangeably. There's definitely some push from our holders to mature the ecosystem faster, to define what we're going to be faster, to mature our business models. But quite frankly, we're not yet there. And so the holder or the investor has two options. Either they stick it out and they adopt that pace of maturation, or they don't, and you can move on to Ethereum or whatever blockchain that you like.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, all the Cardano NFTs that I have, I bought because I thought that they were brilliant pieces of art. I don't expect to be a millionaire overnight. I know that there's a lot of work that goes into this. I'm kidding. I don't think any of them will actually go into value. I legitimately bought them because, as I was talking about, I like so much of the art that's on Cardano. Nighthawke, we've been talking about Cardano. We've been talking about the ecosystem. We've been talking about tribalism. I want to talk about you, what you're doing, because like I said, I've got your link tree pulled up. You're doing so much stuff that I have to have the link tree pulled up because I can't remember all of it. I'm like, when I see the amount of stuff you're doing, I just want to go take a nap, right? I feel lazy.
Me too.
We can take a break here and come back. I'm just going to read them off real quickly, and then you can start with some of your favorites, or maybe the newest one, or what you think is most relevant. Floorless, Head of Growth, Firebird Media, working with Dropshop as partnerships, NFT Guardian, I think you talked about that, Voice of Reason, Twitter Spaces, Developer Collective, a minting agency. You are a sponsorships ambassador for CNFTCon, which was a big conference. You have your own advisory services. You're a Launchpad mentor on JPEG Store. You do roundtables on YouTube for women and prominent people in the space. You've got a YouTube channel, and of course, you've got that lovely Twitter. Wow. Okay. So which one maybe is your favorite right now, or which one do you think is the newest that you're trying to maybe integrate? But I'd love you to talk about all of them or any of them if you want to.
Yeah. So lately I've kind of come at a crossroads where I want to decide, do I really want to be quote unquote an influencer in the space and sort of known for my thoughts, or known for my roundtables and making relationships and sort of hopping around advising different things. And as I was in conversation with a few people in our space, they sort of, related to me as an influencer. They said, oh, you're an influencer, so we could really use your input or your support, or and really, as I thought about, my own roadmap, my own internal roadmap for where I want to be in the space, or what I want to contribute, I really want to start contributing to protocols or tools for our developers that will really push our space forward and provide us more utility and more use cases. I think that's probably the most effective use of my time, as I'm doing this full time as well as my regular day job, right? So I had to think, where do I want to place most of my time? And this opportunity with Flawless is a brand new NFT exchange protocol with Dropshop as a developer. This sort of fell into my lap, and it was an amazing opportunity to be part of a protocol that's basically going to revolutionize the way that we transact NFTs on Cardano. And it's just an amazing opportunity where I can see this making a difference. I can see this going down in history books, and I definitely want to be part of the conversation and part of socializing it, and effectively part of adopting it into our marketplaces, new and emerging.
Fascinating. So now you piqued my interest. What is Flawless? Because I've seen you tweet about it too, but I haven't really investigated it. So like, if it's crazy and it's tell us about it. Like, what is it exactly?
Yeah, so it's a protocol, which means that it's an underlying technology, right? There's no UI for it. It's literally the code. And so for every marketplace like JPEG Store or CNFT.io, effectively, this is going to change the way that you as a marketplace and the holder as an NFT holder transact. So at the moment, when you go onto JPEG Store, you need to, for example, update every single listing you'd like to update. If you see, for example, that you want to change that pricing because the floor has all of a sudden quadrupled in price, and you want to get there and change the pricing to capture that increased run, you're going to have to wait your turn. You're going to have to do it one-on-one. And I think it was Cardano Thor who said he updated 100 NFTs and it took him 6+ hours of doing that. And this marketplace, one of the use cases is that you're going to be able to update all of your listings in one single transaction. So it's like you select, sign the transaction, and all of a sudden all your listings are updated with pricing. However, if another marketplace also adopts and is using Flawless, then all the listings are going to be updated on that marketplace simultaneously. So it's a single point of entry. So you no longer need to go to different marketplaces, so long as they use Flawless, and you'll be able to update your listings, put up, take down, modify. As well, there's another use case, which is probably the most popular one, which is effectively it's going to enforce royalties. So at the moment, what you have are marketplaces who enforce royalties on chain, and then marketplaces that do not. For every marketplace that uses Flawless, they're effectively going to reinforce whatever the project leads designate as their royalty policy. So that's one of the use cases of it. But really, when you think about Flawless, it's a plugin, right? There's obviously a lot of integration that takes place behind the scenes. And as I mentioned, there's no UI. The UI would come on the part of the marketplaces building that. But it really is a matter of a plugin whereby you have this code, the marketplace adopts that code, and all of a sudden they provide more use cases for the average holder, as well as assurance when it comes to royalties on the project side.
Interesting.
Wow.
That's very fascinating.
I definitely see why that is useful. Kelechi, if you have a comment here, I'll let you get in 1 second, because we've spoken about on the show about how Magic Eden screwed itself by dropping royalties down to the floor. Everybody wants to race to the bottom with not paying artists royalties. And then you're just like, well, sorry, y'all, your marketplace is made up of artists. So I don't know, are you going to do the art now? So that is fascinating. Thank you for explaining that. I totally understand why that makes sense now. When you were talking about Cardano Thor taking 6 hours to update 100 listings, it brought me back to when I was a teenager and used to pirate a lot of music. Don't come after me, people. And I remember that before I found out that you could go into iTunes and change information by like selecting a bunch of things and doing it at once, I would do it one by one, and it would take quite a long time. And I have none of that music anymore. So what has happened to it? What was the point? What was the point of it? Floorless. Wow. So when you were saying revolutionary, you weren't kidding. And I find that super fascinating because, in case people don't know what Nighthawke was talking about, JPEG Store is essentially the OpenSea of Cardano for now. Okay. For now, I think it's going to have some competition coming up, and marketplaces that not only use floorless, but that can outcompete JPEG Store in certain ways as this ecosystem develops. That's going to be a huge win. That is fascinating. Kelechi, did you have something to say?
Now, I was just going to comment about the floorless. Like that sounds like a very, very, useful tool for marketplaces and for just retail investors or collectors. So Nighthawke, would you say the flawless, would you say their primary kind of target market is just like marketplaces, or is it like just regular everyday use like retail collectors?
Yeah, it's for marketplaces themselves, and you don't need to be an existing one. Obviously, if there are, and there definitely are emerging markets, but primarily this is a marketplace protocol. So this is something that would plug in there. And I agree with you, Nathan. You spoke previously about some rising competition. There's definitely a few marketplaces coming in that are going to, I think, give JPEG Store a run for their money.
And I'm interested in what your opinions are on I'm sorry, not your opinions, what marketplaces you think that those would be, because I like JPEG Store a lot. We won't get into, apparently there was some JPEG Store drama that happened today. It's not super relevant. All people need to know is that JPEG Store, and Kelechi, you know this because you've pointed me to all the Cardano statistic websites. JPEG Store is something like a 94% market share. So I think it's fair to say they have a monopoly, people. And usually monopolies aren't that great in both economics and art, but it's that way for now. They've been great at growing the space. Right. But who do you think are, and certainly getting into prominence, they've made it easy to use, buy, sell, hold, integrate those wallets.
Right.
Come on, you just plug in your NAMI wallet. You give them the 25 ADA, and then I've got all those cool NFTs that are on my wallet there. Yeah. What do you think are the competing marketplaces for JPEG Store right now, Nighthawke?
Well, I think the most obvious one is CNFT.io, right? Now they're launched minting for projects, and that's sort of the next step. But I do think that that's sort of the obvious one. The next one that's coming up is a decentralized marketplace by Fettuccini of Angel Baby Hit Squad called Plutus Art.
Plutus Art, yeah.
That one's going to be huge. Yeah.
I'm sorry, real quick. There's so many people in just the blockchain space in general that I never get angry at myself for not knowing somebody. Did you say Fettuccini baby of the Angel?
I gotta point this out, and this is a compliment to Nighthawke. I work in pro wrestling outside of here. And in pro wrestling, we get to come up with our own names. And also the football league I work for, we get to come up with our own nicknames in the A7FL. In this space, doing the non-fungible news or doing these podcasts, the names are better than any. I'm old internet. I am in my early 30s. So I am a part of the message board days, the forum days, the AOL chat days. These are better than any screen names I have ever thought of or seen in my life. So shout out to everybody in the crypto and NFT space, especially Nighthawke. Nighthawke's just a badass name and also a pretty cool movie theater in Brooklyn. But Yeah. Can you clarify that name for us just one more time?
What was that name? I caught the fettuccine. What was after that?
Yeah, so his name, fettuccine like the pasta, and he has a Cardano NFT project called Angel Baby Hit Squad and Demon Hit Squad as well, which just minted. But yeah, he's fabulous, and he's starting Pluto's art. So I think that's also going to be a competitive JPEG store.
Perfect. Not only is fettuccine an amazing pasta and still a reason to go to Olive Garden in case you haven't been there in a long time, just great. But yes, I like to echo what Matt said. That's another thing that I love about just the blockchain space in general. But once again, I'll hit back on Cardano. You just like I like the weird and kind of wonderful aspect of the Cardano NFT space like this, because it's never it's also never like sarcastic or like too meta. It's always like this very weird, whimsical, wonderful, at least the stuff that I'm looking at here. But yeah, it's just a lot of fun. I'm interested in Nighthawke, and then Matt or Kelechi, if you have another question, you can jump in. Have you ever thought about having your own NFT collection?
Yeah, everyone asks me this.
All the way to the moon once you do it, Nighthawke. Just do it.
No, it's not my intention to have my own project. The reason being is that when you have a project that is now your child, there's no giving it up, no releasing it. If you'd like to do more in the space, that is, and that's being diplomatic. I see myself as more diversified. I like to have my hands in a bit of everything. And I think that's why I can provide the most value as well. My attention span's really short. So I might be over the project in a matter of 6 months, but I think it's just a huge, huge responsibility to have a project. You are tasked with the unique responsibility of coming up with new innovation constantly. As a brand new project and as a startup business, effectively, you are tasked with investing in your project and being in the red for the first several years. That's average. That's similar to Web 2. For me, this is my second job, but it's also what I do every day of the week. I work crazy hours, and I'm much more of a, I don't know how to describe it, but for me, I like to make sure that my time is compensated, really. And I think it's just a lot. There's a lot of investment you have to do in a project. You not only have to be the funder, but you also need to be the innovator. And you need to kind of have this strong commitment to it. And that takes a very specific kind of person. For me, I like to see big picture, but in terms of the details, the day-to-day, I'm not the best person for that.
That's a good segue to the next question I want to ask. I know like you do a lot of advisory to a lot of projects, and obviously, we did the same with my project, Ghost Chain NFT Club. I would like to pick your brain when it comes to different projects that you've worked with or you've seen in the space. Like, what do you think is the most challenging part of actually not only just launching a project but actually making it successful?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think everyone needs a roadmap, right? You kind of have to have an objective of where you're going, but you also need to make sure that the current technology and the current sort of cost benefit is there. I think what we see a lot of projects doing is saying the community wants a metaverse, or the community wants gamified staking, but then the project leads, because they're not developers, or maybe they're not finance people, quote unquote. They don't know how to do it. They don't know how to put this in force. And I think every successful project has a business model. They know where they're going to build, they know how much it's going to cost, and they know what the benefit of that, or at least forecasted, is. They do their market research, they determine if there is in fact demand in our current ecosystem, and then they ascertain whether that's something they can actually deliver. So having a viable business model is the most important thing. it's unfortunately something that takes a lot of expertise, and it's not just something that a single project leader can ascertain by themselves. They need multiple people within their team, and multiple people takes one of two things. Either it takes immediate cost up front, or it takes equity. And very few project leads are willing to spread that around. So, viable business model, but you also need different team members contributing areas of expertise. And where do you find that? Well, you typically find it in Web 2. But there's, as I mentioned before, there's a talent squeeze. There's a talent squeeze everywhere, but specifically in a startup environment like this, because you might have people from Web 2 who are more than capable of handling scenarios like this, where you're business modeling and you're implementing, but very few can actually work in an ambiguous scenario like this, where the payout is not at all guaranteed, or the effectiveness of what you're launching is not guaranteed at all. So it's a mixed bag. It's very challenging for project leads.
Yes, it seems to me from the outside looking in, and only knowing one NFT project owner, it really is like a startup. But in some ways, I feel like it's actually much more complicated than a startup, because you can read books that have been written since the 30s or the 50s on how to start a business, incorporate it, depending on which geographical location you are in. The space moves so fast, and I just mean the blockchain space in general, not to mention the Cardano space, that to have your head on straight and be organized and be successful and be motivated, that's already hard enough, not even to mention what you're talking about, where it's like, well, are you willing to pay these upfront costs, or are you willing to part with some equity for somebody to actually help you do this? And that's kind of what I was talking about, where it was like, you know that in the blockchain space, no matter what blockchain you're on, but especially Cardano, you're always going to have super technical people, like the developer people. They can write the protocol, they can execute this stuff, blah, blah, blah. And then you're always going to have the super creative people, the artists. They're just like, I just want to create all day digital art, put it up. I don't even care if it's 1080A, but getting them to come together and execute a project so it's successful and it just doesn't disappear after 6 months, I imagine is quite the handful, which is why you have such a unique perspective on this. Another thing I kind of wanted to ask you about is, the tech space in general is notoriously a bunch of dudes, right? Especially a bunch of dudes around computers. But the thing that I really like about blockchain in particular is, in its best case, it is a meritocracy, where if you know the tech and you are able to do stuff, that's just the way it is. Like nobody can tell me that I can't open up a lightning channel on Bitcoin. Nobody can censor a transaction on Bitcoin. You can't censor a transaction on Cardano. If I want to send somebody a CNFT from my Nami wallet, they can't stop it. Like if you know the tech, you can do things in the space. That being said, there are still people in the space, and people have all sorts of flaws. Have you found out, or have you found, since we've talked about Cardano being a much more welcoming blockchain that kind of tries to cultivate a certain ethos, have you found that being a woman in this space is a little bit easier, or kind of a little bit more fun? And especially since you've kind of tried to gather and rally around other sorts of women creators and kind of highlight women in the Cardano space.
Being a woman, I only until I would say recently was, or have been, received any sort of pushback or had to qualify myself. I think that's natural, because we're growing, and obviously that there's going to be multiple sort of parties to contend with and work with. It's true that it seems to be, around the ratio of men to women is about 20-1. That's what it feels like, especially going to CNFT Con in Las Vegas in October. But being a woman, I think you really need to understand that you kind of have to come correct, and that you need to know what your function is, how to communicate that function, and then you need to execute. That's all it is. There's a lot of noise, and this goes back to the tribalism concept, where there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of politics, and if you let them, they can interfere with your objectives.
Right.
However, this is where relationships and this is where your own sort of internal compass comes in. Is first of all, you need to create relationships that are going to help you execute, because this is not a vacuum. You know, we're in a really small blockchain, and it's almost impossible to do things without anyone else's help and or to cross paths with others. And so first and foremost, you need to make relationships as a woman. You need to establish yourself as authority, and you need to have a track record of executing, and whatever that is. That's the first thing. The second thing, as a woman, you need to have an internal compass that says, here's what's really important, and here's what's going to carry me forward so I can begin executing my goals. And here's what's noise. Here is what is just part of a growing ecosystem, part of a bear market, and simply part of culture that you need to contend with. So, for example, if there's an issue on Twitter or someone calls you out, however unfair or fair it is, or if there's some kind of Twitter drama that tries to paint you in an accurate and unfair way, that's noise as well. So really, you have to kind of have that internal consistency of, right, I'm here for a reason. Here's how I'm going to do it. And I'm going to run this like a business, because it truly is. And that's it. That's really all there is to it. It's easy as a woman to feel discouraged and to want people to like you, or everyone. But when you get to a place where your name is known, you will have people that work to kind of pollute your sense of direction. Either because they're not doing what you're doing, they know they can't, or they know they want to, and they just don't know how, multiple scenarios. But it's your job, if you indeed would like to be a pioneer or a builder or whatever you like as a woman, you need to have that constitution of where you're going and what's important and what's not.
It's a nice little roadmap for Cardano ladies that are trying to get into the space. I liked how eloquently you put that. Yeah, definitely. I'm glad that I'm not part of any Twitter drama, and that I'm not popular and nobody knows me. I can do whatever I want as I sit here alone in my empty apartment podcasting. No, it's a lot of fun. Yeah, it's interesting because, BTC Bella, who we had on the show, she is, like I said, she's literally a beauty pageant queen who is into technical analysis and has made a bunch of money trading. And I remember asking her that, and her saying something along of like, people will say like, how much can you know? Or like, if you have beauty, then you can't have brains. And she was like, the results speak for themselves. Like, I know how to do technical analysis, and I know how to trade. And it's such an interesting thing to think about. You mentioned a CNFT con, which I did not go to. Kelechi did not go to. Unfortunately,
next year for sure.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I live here in Denver, Colorado. They had another conference at Gaylord of the Rockies in Aurora, which is like 20 minutes from my apartment, and I just didn't have the money or the time working for BitMart to go. So I missed 2 Cardano conferences this year. I would like to know your impression of the Cardano conferences, because the only conferences I've been to in crypto have been huge ones. I went to Bitcoin Miami, and then me and Kelechi went to Consensus in Austin. So just huge events. But Cardano, as you talked about, although we did see Charles Hoskinson at Consensus, we saw him at the Cardano booth, which was huge, but it was still a booth in general. I'm interested to know, because of how small, what you just talked about, that Cardano is almost like, living in a big, small town, about you go to CNFT Con, you see these people that you've interacted with online, maybe dozens or hundreds of times, finally in person. What was it like? Did you meet a lot of people there? Are crypto conferences worth going to? I'd love for you to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to the one, which is CNFT Con in Las Vegas in October. And I actually didn't book my flight until the day before. And as I noticed, oh gosh, I had to be there quickly. And I wouldn't actually arrive in time to do panels and set up and all this stuff. I actually drove. And what should have taken me 16 hours took me 24 hours total. So I was in my car for quite a long time. I got lost. I was in Idaho, somehow ended up there. I was lost in cliffs. I was driving over cliffs. My hands all palmy. I almost ran out of gas in the deserts. I saw weird things. I slept on the side of the road. I woke up with, the semi sort of driving past and shaking the car. It was sunrise, sunset, you name it. It was really scary. But I got there. And it was marvelous. I haven't spent a lot of time in Las Vegas. I'm much more of a New York, London kind of person, but there it was. And so I get into the hotel and I see all of a sudden it's like at 12 p.m., at night, and I'm just after a 24-hour drive, and I'm all of a sudden accosted by this loud noise from this band playing in the lobby, and it's all these people like at the roulette tables, and all of a sudden they have this band who's like basically entertaining, and there's drinks and it smells of smoke and all this stuff. And I was quite like taken aback. Okay, this is how it's going to be. So I get to, the counter, and they didn't have record of me. But anyway, all of these things that were kind of like, okay, I really hope this is going to go well because this is my first time here. And the next day I get to conference and I start seeing everyone who I kind of recognize on screen. So, the people that I have on my roundtables, like Blake and like Patrick and like Ali of Cardano Women. And all of a sudden it feels like it's a reunion of sorts. It's a reunion of the people who are building in our space and really making a difference. And it was quite an honor. I sort of feel like it was a Disneyland of Cardano NFTs. It truly was work, but it also was relationship building. And it was such a pleasure to interact with these people who you'd only known virtually. And it was a big opportunity, really, because I think that when you meet people in person, it just gives you an extra ounce of credibility, and it gives you opportunity to sort of pitch to them ideas or potentially partner together, which it was my goal, at least going there. And you mentioned previously when reading my link tree that I was part of CNFTCon. I was part of their team I was a sponsorships ambassador. So I was involved in partnering with projects and ecosystem projects and basically taking care of sponsorships. And then the other part of my responsibility was speaking on panels. So I was panel organizer. I put together several panels. I moderated and or spoke on about 8 or 9 panels that weekend. So the cost of that was I was mostly in panel rooms throughout the entire event. And I wish I would have had more time to come down and socialize with the project leads at their booth. But it was a phenomenal event, and I really look forward to the next one next year. It's definitely the Cardano NFT event of the season for sure, is NFTCon.
Well, we missed out, didn't we, Kelechi?
Yeah, I wanted to go too, just for the story. Just end up in Idaho somewhere. Just sounds like an interesting story. Like the time I got abandoned in an empty dance club in Queens. It's not a good time, but a good story.
We're gonna have to.
I have pictures. I will never forget. I will never do that again. I'll always book my flight. But yeah, like that experience, it was crazy. And also, when you get to meet people that are truly making a difference in our space, the Patricks of the world, it sort of solidifies for yourself. I am part of this group. I am an early adopter, and there's so much talent in our space that it gives you more. I guess it sort of validates the investment that you put in, because you trust leadership, you trust what they're doing in our space is good for it, and that they have good intentions. So it's a marvelous opportunity.
Absolutely. Definitely, we will have to go next year, Kelechi, won't we?
Oh, definitely.
Is it going to be in Vegas next year? Because that's my only qualm, is that I really don't like Vegas, but I'd go. I'd go.
I know.
Nighthawke would know.
Yeah. I mean, as I mentioned, I'm not a fan of Vegas either. But yes, the one of the CNFT cons, and I'll just put that out there, will always be in Las Vegas.
Okay. I'll tell you, the thing that I did like about Las Vegas was that you could smoke inside the casinos, which even though I'm not really a smoker, it was just such a 60s, 70s vibe, throwback vibe to me that the fact that you could do it, I was smoking in these casinos and they were like, Nathan, I didn't know you smoked. And I'm like, I don't. I'm just allowed to now. So maybe it's good that it's banned in most of these places. But to what you were saying, Nighthawke, and we're heading towards the end of our conversation here, but I definitely want to hit on some Cardano and major non-Cardano points. Is you're so right that when you finally meet people in person, it like actually solidifies that the stuff that people are doing is actually there. When you said meeting people, down in the lobby or in the hotel, it made me think of the first time that I ever met Kelechi in Austin, Texas. Unfortunately, I've never actually gotten to meet Matt, despite working with him for almost 10 months now. I was supposed to go to New York, but they canceled that. They couldn't have us meet because it would be like a nuclear bomb or something.
The city would have been torn apart.
The city would have
ended poorly for all of us.
5 boroughs, we would have carved out of 6, called it Nathanville. So when you're meeting people in person behind, what is usually a screen, it really does, solidify relationships. I totally understand what you mean there. I had my last question here, like on the tip of my tongue, and it is just totally evaporated.
Well, you know what? We can save that question for the next time we have Nighthawke on the show. Nighthawke, you have been awesome, and we want to talk more with you throughout the rest of this year and into 2023. We will have the never-ending link tree for Nighthawke in the show notes. So if you want to follow what she's doing, if you want to be a part of the communities that she is a part of and she is helping build, you can do that in the show notes. You can also follow us on social media in the show notes, and be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast feed, or click the subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and hit the like on this video, and drop a comment. Let us know what you think. Let us know if you have any questions about Cardano that we can answer in a future episode, where we just ask Kelechi a litany of questions until we run out of battery. But
litany.
Nighthawke, thank you so much for joining us. Nathan, Kelechi, pleasure as always. This has been a BitMart BrainTrust. Here comes the part we all love. Nathan, reading the legal mishigas. Bye-bye.
Hello to everybody out there in crypto land. Did you enjoy that conversation? I know that I did. It's always interesting to learn more about crypto projects, NFTs, and what is going on in this very unique industry. But now we've got to get some legal stuff out of the way, all right? It's just the way that it is. So I wanted to let you know that all opinions and actions expressed and undertaken by the hosts and guests are individual opinions and actions and do not reflect the views and actions of BitMart. BitMart does not guarantee the accuracy, applicability, reliability, integrity, performance, completeness, or appropriateness of this content. The value of digital currencies can go up or down, and there can be a substantial risk in buying, selling, holding, or investing in digital currencies. You should carefully consider whether trading or holding digital currencies is suitable for you based on your personal investment objectives, financial circumstances, and risk tolerance. BitMart does not provide investment, tax, or legal advice. Use of BitMart services is entirely at your own risk.